As the sun set, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood, Meredith paced the living room, her mind racing. Karen's ominous threat had left her deeply unsettled, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the conflict was far from over. Tommy watched his grandmother from the sofa, his small fingers fidgeting anxiously. "Grandma, what are we going to do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Meredith paused mid-stride and turned to face her grandson. "Don't worry, Tommy. I'm not going to let that woman hurt you. We're going to figure this out, okay?" She sat down next to him, wrapping an arm around his slim shoulders. "I called your mom as soon as we got home. She's on her way over, and we're going to talk about what our next step should be." Tommy nodded, but Meredith could see the fear still lingering in his eyes. She pulled him close, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of his head. "I promise, everything is going to be all right. We're in this together." Just then, the sound of a car door slamming outside drew their attention. Meredith peered through the window to see her daughter, Sarah, hurrying up the walkway, her brow furrowed with concern. Meredith rushed to the door, pulling it open as Sarah reached the porch. "Mom, what's going on? You said it was an emergency." Sarah's gaze darted around, searching for any sign of danger. "It's that woman from the park, Karen," Meredith explained, ushering her daughter inside. "She's threatening us, and I'm worried she might try to do something." Sarah's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. "I see. Well, don't worry, we're going to put a stop to this once and for all." She moved past Meredith, heading directly to the kitchen table, where she began rifling through her briefcase. "All right, let's go over everything that's happened so far. I need to know every detail if I'm going to build a strong case against her." As Meredith and Tommy recounted the events at the park, Sarah listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When they finished, she leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Okay, here's what we're going to do." Karen paced back and forth in her living room, fury burning in her chest. How dare that woman and her brat disrespect her like that? She fumed, already formulating a plan. Reaching for her phone, Karen dialed a familiar number. "Hello, this is Karen Jacobs. I need to report an incident at the park. There's a child there causing a disturbance and refusing to follow the rules." On the other end of the line, the 911 operator listened patiently as Karen launched into a tirade about the unruly boy and his irresponsible grandmother. "All right, ma'am. I've noted your complaint. We'll have an officer investigate the situation," the operator replied, trying to sound reassuring. Karen huffed in satisfaction. "Good. This kind of behavior can't be tolerated. Those freeloaders need to learn to respect the community." After ending the call, Karen allowed herself a smug smile. That should teach that old bat a lesson about who's in charge around here. Nobody crossed Karen Jacobs and got away with it. Meanwhile, Meredith was blissfully unaware of the impending storm. She and Tommy had returned home and were enjoying a quiet afternoon, unaware of the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. It wasn't until later that evening, when a sharp knock came at the door, that Meredith's sense of foreboding returned. She opened the door to find a police officer standing on her doorstep. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Jenkins. We've received a complaint about a disturbance at the park involving your grandson. Can you come with me to the station to discuss the incident?" Meredith felt her heart skip a beat. "What? A disturbance? But that's not possible. Tommy and I were just—" "I'm afraid I'll need you to come with me, ma'am," the officer interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. Meredith glanced back at Tommy, who was watching the exchange with wide, fearful eyes. Steeling herself, she stepped outside, determined to get to the bottom of this. As Meredith followed the officer to the police station, her mind raced with possibilities. What could Karen have possibly told them that would warrant a visit from the police? She had to remain calm and focus on clearing her grandson's name. Upon arriving at the station, Meredith was ushered into a small interview room, where Karen was already seated, a smug expression on her face. "Mrs. Jacobs has informed us that your grandson was causing a disturbance at the park earlier today," the officer explained, turning to Meredith. "She claims he was refusing to vacate a swing, even after she asked him to." Meredith's eyes narrowed as she glared at Karen. "That's completely false. Tommy was simply playing on the swings as any child would. There was no disturbance, and I certainly didn't refuse to cooperate." Karen scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "That's not what I saw. That boy was hogging the swing and being disrespectful. I asked him to leave, and his grandmother refused to discipline him." "That's a lie," Meredith exclaimed, her voice rising with anger. "You were the one yelling and causing a scene. Tommy did nothing wrong." The officer held up a hand, effectively silencing the two women. "All right, let's try to keep this civil. Mrs. Jacobs, do you have any evidence to back up your claims?" Karen's confident facade faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Well, no, but I'm a respected member of this community. Surely my word should carry some weight." Meredith snorted in derision. "Respected? You're nothing but a bully who thinks she can push people around. My grandson is a kind, well-behaved child, and I have a witness who can attest to that." The officer looked from one woman to the other, an expression of confusion on his face. "I'm afraid without any concrete evidence, this is simply a case of one person's word against another's. Unless there's something else I should know, I don't see grounds for any formal charges." Karen's face flushed with anger, and she opened her mouth to protest, but Meredith beat her to it. "Actually, officer, there is something you should know." Meredith reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "My daughter is a lawyer, and she would be more than happy to discuss this matter with you further." The officer's eyebrows rose as he read the card, and he cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I see. Well, in that case, I believe we're done here. Thank you for your time, ladies." As they were leaving the station, Meredith couldn't resist a triumphant glance in Karen's direction. The look of pure fury on the other woman's face was the sweetest victory she could have hoped for. The car ride home was tense and silent, save for the occasional sniffles from Tommy in the backseat. Meredith could feel his anxiety and did her best to reassure him. "Don't worry, sweetie. Everything is going to be just fine. That mean lady was just trying to cause trouble, but the police saw right through her lies." Tommy looked up at his grandmother with uncertainty. "But Grandma, what if she tries to do something else? What if she tries to hurt us?" Meredith reached back and gave his hand a gentle squeeze. "I won't let that happen, Tommy. I promise I'll protect you, no matter what." As they pulled into the driveway, Meredith noticed a familiar figure lurking near the front door. It was Karen, her arms crossed and a sour expression on her face. Meredith took a deep breath, bracing herself for another confrontation. She ushered Tommy inside, then turned to face Karen. "Can I help you with something, Mrs. Jacobs?" she asked, her tone clipped and guarded. Karen's lips curled into a sneer. "So, you managed to weasel your way out of this one, did you? Don't think this is over. I always get what I want, and I won't rest until that little brat of yours is out of my neighborhood." Meredith felt a surge of protectiveness. "Your neighborhood? Last time I checked, this was a public park, open to everyone. And my grandson is not a brat. He's a kind, well-behaved child who doesn't deserve to be treated this way." "We'll see about that," Karen spat. "I have friends in high places, and I won't hesitate to use them to get my way. You and your grandson better watch your backs." With that, Karen turned on her heel and stalked off, leaving Meredith and Tommy standing on the doorstep, a sense of dread slowly creeping in. Meredith ushered Tommy inside, locking the door behind them. She knew they were in for a fight, but she was determined to protect her family at all costs. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood, Meredith paced the living room, her mind racing. Karen's ominous threat had left her deeply unsettled, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the conflict was far from over. Tommy watched his grandmother from the sofa, his small fingers fidgeting anxiously. "Grandma, what are we going to do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Meredith paused mid-stride and turned to face her grandson. "Don't worry, Tommy. I'm not going to let that woman hurt you. We're going to figure this out, okay?" She sat down next to him, wrapping an arm around his slim shoulders. "I called your mom as soon as we got home. She's on her way over, and we're going to talk about what our next step should be." Tommy nodded, but Meredith could see the fear still lingering in his eyes. She pulled him close, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of his head. "I promise, everything is going to be all right. We're in this together." Just then, the sound of a car door slamming outside drew their attention. Meredith peered through the window to see her daughter, Sarah, hurrying up the walkway, her brow furrowed with concern. Meredith rushed to the door, pulling it open as Sarah reached the porch. "Mom, what's going on? You said it was an emergency." Sarah's gaze darted around, searching for any sign of danger. "It's that woman from the park, Karen," Meredith explained, ushering her daughter inside. "She's threatening us, and I'm worried she might try to do something." Sarah's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. "I see. Well, don't worry, we're going to put a stop to this once and for all." She moved past Meredith, heading directly to the kitchen table, where she began rifling through her briefcase. "All right, let's go over everything that's happened so far. I need to know every detail if I'm going to build a strong case against her." As Meredith and Tommy recounted the events at the park, Sarah listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When they finished, she leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Okay, here's what we're going to do." Sarah's plan was elegant in its simplicity, yet Meredith couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. "Are you sure this is the best approach?" she asked, glancing at Tommy, who was watching the exchange with rapt attention. "Trust me, Mom," Sarah replied, her voice firm. "We need to nip this in the bud before it escalates any further. Karen's the type to keep pushing the boundaries, and we can't afford to let her get away with this." Meredith nodded reluctantly, knowing her daughter's legal expertise far outweighed her own. "All right, let's do it." The next morning, Sarah arrived at the park, her briefcase in hand, just as Karen was about to leave. "Mrs. Jacobs, a moment of your time, please," she called out, her tone polite, but with an underlying edge. Karen whirled around, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Sarah. "What do you want?" she snapped. "My name is Sarah Wilkins, and I'm an attorney representing my mother, Meredith, and my nephew Tommy," Sarah said, stepping forward. "I understand there was an incident yesterday involving my son and some unfounded allegations." Karen's lips curled into a sneer. "Unfounded? That brat of yours was causing a disturbance, and your mother refused to discipline him. I have every right to report such behavior." "I'm afraid that's not the case," Sarah replied, her voice calm and measured. "My mother and nephew were simply enjoying the park, as any citizen has the right to do. Your actions yesterday were not only unwarranted, but they also constitute harassment and defamation of character." Karen's eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to protest, but Sarah raised a hand to silence her. "Now I'm willing to resolve this matter amicably, but if you persist in harassing my family, I will have no choice but to pursue legal action. Do I make myself clear?" The color drained from Karen's face, and she swallowed hard. "You can't do this to me," she stammered. "I'm a respected member of this community." "Then act like it," Sarah said, her gaze unwavering. "Leave my family alone, or you'll be hearing from my office." Without another word, Karen turned and hurried away, leaving Sarah with a satisfied smile. Meredith, who had been watching the exchange from a distance, hurried over, Tommy in tow. "That was incredible, Sarah," Meredith said, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. I can't believe you got her to back down like that. Sarah shrugged, her expression modest. It's all in a day's work. Now, let's hope she's learned her lesson and will leave us alone from now on. As they walked away, Meredith couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. With Sarah's help, they had faced down the formidable Karen and emerged victorious. Perhaps, just maybe, the worst was behind them. In the days that followed, the neighborhood seemed to have returned to a state of relative peace. Karen had been conspicuously absent from the park, and Meredith and Tommy were able to enjoy their time there without incident. However, the lingering sense of unease never fully dissipated from Meredith's mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was biding her time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One afternoon, as Meredith and Tommy were preparing to head home, they spotted a familiar figure approaching. It was Karen, her face set in a determined expression. Meredith immediately tensed, her hand tightening around Tommy's. "Stay close to me, sweetie," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the approaching woman. Karen came to a stop in front of them, her gaze hardening as it settled on Tommy. "So, I see you're still here, polluting our community with your presence," she spat. Meredith stepped forward, shielding her grandson. "What do you want, Karen?" she asked, her voice laced with barely contained anger. "What I want is for you and your hoodlum of a grandson to leave this neighborhood and never come back," Karen growled. "I've had enough of your disrespect and your constant rule-breaking." Meredith felt her blood boil. "How dare you? Tommy has done nothing wrong, and we have every right to be here. Just because you don't like us doesn't mean you can bully us out of our own community." Karen's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Oh, I think you'll find that I can do whatever I want. I've got friends in high places, remember." She reached into her purse, pulling out a stack of papers. "And I've got the paperwork to prove it." Meredith's heart sank as she recognized the official-looking documents. "What is this?" she asked, dread seeping into her voice. "This," Karen said, a triumphant grin spreading across her face, "is a restraining order. It prohibits you and your grandson from setting foot in this park or anywhere else in our neighborhood." Meredith felt the world tilt around her as she stared at the papers, her mind racing to find a way out of this nightmare. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice trembling. Karen's smile only grew wider. "Oh, but it is. And if you try to defy this order, I can have you both arrested. So, I suggest you pack up and leave. The sooner, the better." With that, Karen turned and walked away, leaving Meredith and Tommy standing in the park, their dreams of a peaceful afternoon shattered. Meredith's hands shook as she tried to make sense of the restraining order in her hands. How could this be happening? She and Tommy had done nothing wrong. Yet somehow Karen had managed to use the system against them. Tommy looked up at his grandmother, his eyes filled with confusion and fear. "Grandma, what does this mean? Can we still come to the park?" Meredith's heart broke as she met his gaze. "I'm afraid not, sweetie," she said, her voice trembling. "This piece of paper says we're not allowed to be here anymore." Tears welled up in Tommy's eyes, and Meredith pulled him into a tight hug, her own tears threatening to spill over. "I'm so sorry, Tommy. I promise we're going to figure this out, okay?" As they made their way home, Meredith's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. She knew she had to call Sarah to get her legal expertise involved once again. But the thought of having to fight this battle all over again filled her with dread. When they arrived at the house, Meredith immediately dialed her daughter's number, explaining the situation in a shaky voice. Sarah's reaction was one of outrage and determination. "This is unacceptable," she exclaimed. "That woman has clearly abused the legal system to harass you and Tommy. Don't worry, Mom. I'm going to get this restraining order overturned as soon as possible." Meredith felt a glimmer of hope at her daughter's words, but the worry never fully subsided. "I know you'll do your best, Sarah, but I'm just so tired of fighting. What if Karen keeps finding new ways to torment us?" "Then we'll keep fighting," Sarah said, her voice resolute. I won't let her get away with this, and I know you won't either. We're in this together, Mom. I promise. We'll get through this." As Meredith ended the call, she couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of determination. With Sarah in her corner, she knew they had a fighting chance against Karen's relentless campaign of harassment. Though the path ahead was uncertain, Meredith was prepared to do whatever it took to protect her family and reclaim their rightful place in the community. This was a battle she was determined to win, no matter the cost.